So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time within 30 minutes, with the idea that you get to cover the current affairs on a daily basis, but you don't have to spend your entire day just reading the newspaper. Now, just watching this lecture within 30 minutes would be job half done, because just after watching this lecture, you need to revise it as well. Why? Well, revision helps in consolidating these current affairs in your memory. Otherwise, you'll quickly forget them. Now, you can revise these current affairs from the notes provided by us, and these notes are shared on our Telegram platform. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section just below this video. Now, let's begin today's session. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. So, in total, we'll be covering these 5 topics. Okay, first in this list is retrospective environmental clearance. Now, Supreme Court has given an important judgment which has repercussions for the entire environmental law and environmental jurisprudence. Okay, and that is with respect to retrospective clearance of environmental projects. Okay, or not environmental projects, projects that harm the environment. Because all the public projects or all these projects, okay, infrastructure projects require environmental clearance. Okay, now if you give these projects clearances retrospectively, well, Supreme Court has an opinion on that. So we'll talk about this. Then we'll talk about core inflation and RBI's rate cuts. As you all know, that RBI manages inflation through its interest rate policy. If inflation is low, benign, then RBI cuts interest rates to boost the economy. And if inflation is too high, then RBI raises interest rates. Okay. Now, what is the significance of core inflation in these entire dynamics? Okay, we'll talk about this. Then we'll talk about atypical summer of 2025. Well, everyone warned that this summer is going to be really hot. There are going to be multiple episodes of heat waves. But so far, till mid of May, summer has not been that hot. Now, what are the reasons behind that? We'll talk about this. Then we'll talk about overseas citizens of India, because recently Ministry of Home Affairs launched a OCI portal where foreign citizens can register and they can get their OCI card quickly. So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC, a UPI-like project by Government of India. And on this project, well, Uber is going to get on board. We all know the cab hailing ride service Uber. Okay, they are going to utilize ONDC to expand their operations in India. So what is ONDC? We'll talk about this too. Okay, so these are the 5 topics that we will focus our attention on. Let's start discussing them one by one. All right, then we'll start with retrospective environment clearances. Now, listen to me carefully. You need to know a bit of background to understand this particular judgment given by Supreme Court. And this is a landmark judgment as far as environmental jurisprudence is concerned. Look, the thing is that all infrastructure projects, before they start operations, they have to get environmental clearances. Okay? And these environmental clearances would come after environment impact assessment. Okay, in fact, government has specific rules with respect to environmental impact assessment via a notification which is known as EIA notification 2006. Okay, so government basically gave certain rules. How would you do this environmental impact assessment? And based on the results of this assessment, you will give environmental clearances to particular projects, infrastructure projects, so that they can go ahead. Okay. Now, these are the rules. So you need environmental clearance before starting your operations or before starting your infrastructure project. Now, what happened was there were various projects which were not given environmental clearances and they were going on. Okay, either they expanded their operations way beyond their prescribed limit, or they started without getting environmental clearance. Now, in 2017, government came out with a notification. That notification says that there is a 6-month window. In this 6-month window, all the projects that have started their operations without getting environmental clearances, well, they will be given general amnesty, okay? And they would be allowed to take this environmental clearance now within this 6-month windows. So they would be given general forgiveness. Even if they have violated government rules, well, for these 6 months, they can come to the government and take this environmental clearance. Even if they started their project without getting environmental clearance, now they can get this environmental clearance. So basically, what the government was trying to do was, the government was trying to give them environmental clearance retrospectively. Okay, by going back, these projects are well advanced. They have started without the clearance, but government will go back and then give them clearance. Okay. Now, this was against the rules, okay, as per EIA 2006. Why? Because you need, before starting the project, you need this environmental clearance. But these projects already started, and the government was saying that now you can take environmental clearance. So various petitions were filed in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court said that this is illegal. No project in India can start without environmental clearance, and government cannot come out with a notification later saying that, okay, we forgive you for starting the project, now you can take your environmental clearance. Okay, there would be no retrospective environmental clearance, which is also known as ex post facto clearance. That means going back and giving them clearance. Okay, this is what the Supreme Court has said, and Supreme Court has basically set a precedent. Okay, as per this precedent, you cannot go back and give environmental clearance. Okay, the judgment also restrained the center from issuing similar notifications. Okay, so like the 2017 notification, the government cannot in future also release such a notification. That is banned, that is considered illegal as per the Supreme Court. Okay, because that would violate the rules established under Environmental Impact Assessment Notification of 2006. Okay, now the issue I have explained to you, but let's read it again. So in March 2017, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change had issued a notification providing a one-time 6-month window for industries to apply for environmental clearance. It was applicable, and this is the controversial part, it was applicable for projects that began operations without getting environmental clearance, or those which expanded beyond what they were permitted. So maybe they got environmental clearance for, let's suppose, 10 acres. But these infrastructure projects expanded to 20 acres without taking the clearance for extra 10 acres, right? They would be allowed to take environmental clearance. Notably though, as per the law, well, prior clearance is required as per Environment Impact Assessment Notification of 2006. But they did it anyways, and the government gave a general amnesty. Okay, the government's rationale was, many people raised questions in 2017 itself, but the government's argument was that rather than leaving these projects, it's better to get them get their compliance for environmental clearance rather than leaving them as it is. It is better to basically make them take all the necessary steps to minimize their impact on the environment and get the environmental clearance. Okay, so why should we leave these projects? We should give them environmental clearance whenever we can, right? So rather than leaving cases of violation unchecked, they should be brought under compliance at the earliest. So this was government's argument. Plus the government says that for the time being or the time under which they operated without the clearance, the government will fine them also. So they can get their clearance now. And because they committed something illegal, because they continued without getting the clearance, we will fine them. So after paying that fine, they can get the clearance and go on their business as usual. Okay, this is something that the Supreme Court has objected to. They say that fine isn't enough and rules are rules. You cannot give general forgiveness to people who have not followed EIA notification 2006. Okay, this is not allowed. Retrospective clearances are not allowed. Okay, and what was Supreme Court's argument? So Supreme Court basically cited Article 21. Article 21 says right to protection of life and personal liberty. Now within this Article 21, within this right to protection of life and liberty, right to a safe, healthy and pollution-free environment is subsumed. So right to a healthy, pollution-free environment is part of our right to life. Okay. So this has the Supreme Court had made that clear in its previous judgment, that right to good environment is part of right to life. So if you're not allowing right to good environment, well, you're violating right to life, Article 21, which is the fundamental right. Plus, the Supreme Court also cited Article 14. Article 14 is right to equality. Okay. Why is Article 14 into question? Well, the Supreme Court says that those industries which took environmental clearance, okay, well, they should be rewarded. And those industries which did not take environmental clearance, well, they should be punished. But you are putting both of them on the same pedestal. Now, in future, any company or any industry would think that there is no point in taking environmental clearance because in future government will forgive us, right? So it is basically, the Supreme Court says that this is against right to equality. Why? Because, well, the people who took environmental clearance and the people who did not take environmental clearance, well, they are same in the eyes of law. You are treating them similarly. That shouldn't be the case. What's the fault of that company which took that step and took environmental clearance and then started functioning? A law abiding company is being treated similarly to a law violating company. So this is violation of Article 14. Plus, the Supreme Court also cited two previous judgments, Common Cause versus Union of India and Alembic Pharmaceuticals versus Rohit Prajapati. As per these two judgments, well, ex post facto clearances or retrospective environmental clearances are not part of environmental law. So by citing these two judgments, Supreme Court says that this 2017 notification is not allowed. Okay, now it is a landmark judgment for people who are interested in environmental law, and it is a landmark judgment for environmental jurisprudence in future. So that is why it is important, and that's why we were discussing it. Clear? All right, now let's move on to second news item of the day, which is core inflation and RBI's rate cuts. Now hear me out carefully. Look, the thing is that, well, whenever there is high inflation, okay, inflation is because of two factors. Prices rise because of two factors. Well, they rise because of the interplay of demand and supply of products. Okay. Now, inflation happens whenever demand is higher than supply. So, whenever demand is higher than supply, inflation would be there. Now, this can occur through two ways. Either the demand has risen or the supply has fallen. Okay, so when demand rises, inflation happens, or when the supply falls, then also inflation happens. Okay, whenever inflation happens because of demand rise, then it is known as demand pull inflation. Okay, and whenever inflation happens because supply fell, that is known as supply shock inflation. Okay, you need to know this. So inflation can rise because of two things. Either the demand increases, demand, that means people have more money, that's why they're demanding more goods and services, or the supply of these goods and services falls drastically. These are the only two reasons. Okay, now the thing is that the job of keeping inflation under control is basically that of RBI or a committee of RBI known as Monetary Policy Committee. Okay, now to keep inflation under control, Monetary Policy Committee or RBI's Monetary Policy Committee basically uses interest rates. Okay, so when inflation rises, okay, you increase interest rates, and when inflation is low, well, you decrease interest rates because lower interest rates would boost the economy. So if you're not worried about inflation, then you try to boost the economy. But if you're worried about inflation, you say that economy should be sidestepped. Okay, economy or the GDP growth should be put on back burner, and we need to control inflation. For that, we need to increase interest rates. Now the thing is that how can interest rates control inflation? What happens is that when you increase interest rates, well, borrowing becomes expensive. Okay, it would be difficult for people to borrow because they have to pay higher interest rates. That is why not many people borrow. Well, when not many people borrow, there is less money with the people. And when there is less money with the people, demand falls. Okay. And when demand falls, well, inflation is under control. So through interest rates, RBI influences demand, and through demand, RBI influences inflation. Now comes the challenging part. Okay. Now hear me out carefully. The thing is that inflation is complete inflation. Okay. Inflation of everything. Everything is under this. Everything is rising. Everything's price is rising. Okay. Then there is a component called core inflation. Now, what is core inflation? Core inflation is non-food, non-fuel inflation. Okay. Non-food, when you remove food items, when you remove fuel items, and then you check inflation, that is core inflation. Okay. Now, the thing is that people have been saying for quite some time that RBI's decision to increase interest rates or reduce interest rates should be based on core inflation, because core inflation mostly happens through demand pull reasons or demand pull factors, whereas food inflation and fuel inflation happens through supply reasons. Okay, it happens through supply reasons. Now, if RBI increases interest rates, it would definitely hamper demand, but it won't hamper supply. So, RBI's interest rate policy cannot control food inflation or fuel inflation. So, why is RBI's policy based on, or RBI's interest rate policy is based on food and fuel inflation? Because food and fuel inflation are dependent on supply. If monsoon was all right, well, supply of food grains would be high. Well, inflation would be low as far as food grains are concerned, right? Food and fuel are based on supply side factors, which RBI cannot control through interest rates. So why is RBI focused on entire inflation numbers for deciding their interest rate policy? They should only focus on core inflation, right? That's the entire thing. Okay. The reason why we should focus on core is that food and fuel inflation are largely driven by supply side factors like rainfall, weather anomalies, geopolitical events. So if there is a war in Iraq, okay, Iraq's fuel supply would decline, global fuel supply would decline, prices of fuel would rise. But RBI's interest rate policy only affects aggregate demand. So RBI basically decides its interest rate policy based on inflation, complete inflation, which is also known as headline inflation. Okay. But within headline inflation, there is food and fuel as well, which won't be affected by RBI's interest rate policy. Therefore, instead of targeting headline inflation, we should target core inflation, because interest rates have impact on core inflation only. We should ignore food and fuel inflation. Okay. And in the recent times, well, RBI has increased its interest rates or kept its interest rates high because inflation was high. But experts found out that this inflation was high because of food and fuel, not because of core. So it was wrong for RBI to keep its interest rates high because core inflation was down. Food and fuel inflation was high, which made the entire inflation look high. Clear? That's the thing. Okay, so you should remember this. Now, one more thing. Now things have changed. Okay, earlier what happened was that the entire inflation was pulled upwards because of food and fuel. But in recent times, food and fuel have seen dramatic fall in prices. They are trailing the average inflation numbers. Okay, the reasons for that are, well, because El Nino ended and La Nina started, so there was ample monsoon, ample rainfall, good Rabi crop season, so supply of food grains was high. Okay, plus this year also Indian Meteorological Department says that rainfall would be adequate. So there is no worry as far as food inflation is concerned, food supply is concerned, and there is no worry as far as international oil prices are concerned. So food and fuel inflation would now fall. Now RBI can reduce its interest rates. Basically, that's the argument. But why I included this article in today's discussion was because you need to understand this relationship between interest rates, RBI's interest rate policy, and inflation, particularly core inflation. Okay. Now let's move on to third news item, which is atypical summer of 2025. So the summer of 2025, atypical means abnormal. Okay. So summer of 2025 has been unusual so far. High day temperatures typically reaching 40 to 45 degrees Celsius and heat wave days have been largely absent. And May in particular has been exceptionally wet in many parts of the country. You all must have seen some amounts of rainfall in the month of May. Okay, they were accompanied by thunderstorms, heavy rain in some cases, even hail. So that has cooled down the temperatures, especially of the month of May, which is used to seeing, well, heat waves and very high temperatures. Now, why is the month of May so atypical? Okay, the reasons are number one, western disturbances. These are cyclonic disturbances that originate in the Mediterranean Sea and they travel eastward, reaching Afghanistan, Pakistan, India. And because they travel over Mediterranean Sea, Caspian Sea, they carry a lot of moisture. So when they reach India, they drop this moisture in the form of rain. And in high mountains, they drop this moisture in the form of snow. Now, because of western disturbances, there were episodes of western disturbances in the month of March, April, and even in May. Because of that, well, rainfall happened, thunderstorms happened, okay, quite frequently, which basically cooled down the temperatures. Okay, so this was reason number one. Reason number two was there were also moisture incursions into mainland. So there were winds that originated in Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea and they entered into the Indian subcontinent, dropping their moisture by causing rainfall. So there was moisture not just from western disturbances but also from Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea which caused rainfall. Now these thunderstorm events have the capacity of dropping temperatures by at least 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. So we are witnessing lower temperatures by at least 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, okay, in the month of May. That is why the month of May has been abnormal. Okay. Now going forward, what are the predictions of weather experts in future? Is this below normal heat, okay, or is this cool summer trend going to continue? Well, Indian Meteorological Department says no. Okay, and why? Even though normal or below temperatures and above normal rainfall have been recorded for majority of days in May, the IMD has said that there is likelihood of development of heat wave conditions over northwest India towards the end of the month. Rajasthan and Haryana will experience a heat wave until May 23. Summer over north and northwest India extends well into June until monsoon arrives at the end of June. Okay, so the thing is that heat is going to come back. Normal hot days are going to come back. That's what IMD predicts. No more rainfall. Clear? So that's the thing. Now let's move on to fourth news item, which is overseas citizen of India. So Union Home Minister and Minister of Cooperation Shri Amit Shah launched the new Overseas Citizen of India portal. The revamped OCI portal with an updated user interface has been launched to simplify registration for overseas citizens. The new portal will provide enhanced functionality, advanced security, and user-friendly experience for the existing 5 million OCI card holders. The thing is that, look, there are many Indians living abroad. These Indians have also taken citizenship of those countries. Okay, there are many US citizens, Australian citizens, Canadian citizens, okay, British citizens who live abroad. Okay, they are citizens of those countries. But they are Indians, they are people of Indian origin and they have an India connection. Some people have families in India, they send remittances over here, okay, and they have an India connection. So look, India does not allow dual citizenship. Okay, you cannot be a citizen of other country and India also. But India knows that these people are Indians and they have an India connection. They want frequent travel to India to meet their family and do business in India also. So India has come up with these people who have a strong connection with India, even though they are citizens of other countries, well, they can register for being overseas citizen of India. Okay, remember, it is not dual citizenship, but they can register for overseas citizenship of India and they will get an OCI card. Okay, this OCI card will give them certain privileges in India. For example, visa free travel into India, they can buy property in India, okay, they can do business in India, they have certain privileges. Of course, they can't vote in India because they are not Indian citizens. But apart from that, there are so many privileges that other foreign travelers are not allowed, but these OCI card holders are allowed. Okay, they can even register for Aadhaar card also. Okay, so this is something that has been provided to OCI card holders. Now, people of Indian origin can apply for OCI registration through this portal. This portal was launched in 2013, but now it has been upgraded, and that's why it was in the news. Okay, so about OCI scheme. So it was introduced through an amendment to the Citizenship Act of 1955 in 2005. The scheme provides for registration of persons of Indian origin as overseas citizens of India. Now, how will you decide who is a person of Indian origin? Well, if they were citizens of India sometime in the past, or if they or their fathers or grandfathers were eligible for being citizens of India on 26 January 1950, then they are categorized as PIO and they can register for OCI card scheme. But yes, people who were citizens of Pakistan or Bangladesh, or their parents were citizens of Pakistan and Bangladesh, or their grandparents were citizens of Pakistan and Bangladesh, they are not allowed to apply for OCI card scheme. Okay, because the thing is that well, there are people who were part of India. Okay, for example, there are people whose grandparents were part of independent United India under British rule. But when Pakistan got made, they got a Pakistan passport. So they can't say we are of Indian origin because once we were citizens of United India. Okay, so Pakistanis and Bangladeshis are, well, blocked from this registration. Clear? Now, there is some information about this portal. Plus, in your notes, I have also listed down the privileges that these OCI card holders have. For example, they can register for Aadhaar card. They have multiple entry exit, visa free entry in India, and many other privileges. You can find those privileges in your notes. Okay, and now we'll move forward to open network for digital commerce. So starting with Delhi NCR, ride-hailing app Uber will now allow users to buy QR code-based metro tickets. So users can buy metro tickets using QR code-based thing through Uber app. And Uber app will use ONDC, India's Open Network for Digital Commerce. So look, for seamless payments, Government of India launched UPI, right? And UPI can be used by multiple apps like Google Pay will use it. Okay, Paytm will use it, Bharat Pay and many other apps would use UPI for seamless payment. Similarly, for e-commerce, government created ONDC and different apps can use ONDC network for launching their own open e-commerce business. Okay, so basically ONDC is a UPI like thing for digital commerce. Now, Uber plans to use this for people to buy metro tickets. Okay, they will even provide food deliveries. Uber will provide Uber Eats. Okay, like there is Swiggy and Zomato. Therefore, Uber also wants to enter into this food delivery business or logistics business using ONDC. Clear? So about ONDC, well, launched in 2021 by Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, which is under Commerce Ministry. Okay, ONDC is a decentralized interoperable network that connects buyers and sellers. It is much like UPI, works for digital payments. Currently, these networks do not have to pay any fee for using ONDC. Okay, but ONDC is planning to fee. So, for example, 2 rupees per 200 rupee transaction or whatnot. But that's in future. Currently, it's free. Clear? And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But like I say this every time in the end, it will add more value if you revise this lecture as well. So please do not forget to revise it. And I would sign off with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.